What's up, YouTube fam? It's Baby from TheZenDoc here. I hope you guys are doing well today. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. So today I'm about to start a new project, and I thought I would take you all behind the scenes with me so that we can do this together. Before we jump into it, if you're not subscribed to my channel, if you're just seeing it for the first time, welcome. If you're someone who watches on a weekly basis, welcome back. But if you're not subscribed, I would really, truly appreciate if you would just hit that subscribe button. If you can't tell already, I'm just going to assure you and say that there is a lot of value to be expected from this page. I am always documenting my process and sharing my journey as a mixed media artist, and you can just expect tons of value added, a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my skills, a lot of literally all that I know I am sharing. So truly would appreciate your support if you just hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, turn on bell notifications. All right, with all that spiel out of the way, let's get into the actual project. So in my typical fashion, I'm just going to start off by stapling I've got my flexible wire mesh, and if you're working with this, you should really be wearing gloves because the edges are really sharp. I don't really like to wear gloves, but that's a risk that I am willing to take. Don't be like me. But I'm just going to start off by stapling the wire mesh to the canvas so that I have a base to work with. I'm also just going to put on my apron so that I am not ruining my dress at any point. Okay, now that I have it stapled, I'm just going to take some time to figure out what shape works best for the materials that I currently have in hand and kind of just what I'm gravitating towards. This process might take some time and sometimes it may not, but I always say if there's any point in the process to really just take your time, it's probably this, because whatever shape you create from here is what you'll be building on, and you want to make sure that you like it and that you've created a shape that you love. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, so I kind of have an idea of where I want to go with this sculpture. And so what I'm going to do is flip it back and staple these two ends to the canvas as well. We're doing this now because once I start to shape it, it would be almost impossible or really difficult to staple it, because then you don't want to mess up the shape that you already have going on up top. So we're going to shape it, and once I staple this, I'm going to use my hot glue gun to begin to glue the wire mesh to the canvas in a way that holds the shape that I have in mind. I'm going to be working slowly, but fingers crossed. Okay, so it's taking me some time to really get the shape set with the hot glue gone, but this is what we have. And now for me to move on, my next step is to cover the wire with my plaster bandages. And I'm just going to do that by wetting my plaster bandages and layering it over the wire mesh, which you'll see in a second. This is probably the messiest part of the process, but it needs to be done because if I don't put this layer of plastic bandages over the wire mesh and I just try to put my joint compound paste, it's going to fall through the holes in the wire mesh and it's just going to create a whole ton of mess. It's not necessary. And also, if you've noticed, my wire mesh is really flexible. So any little bend will dent it. And once these begin to dry, it gives it more strength because these will begin to dry hard. And so that solidifies the foundation for my sculpture and then allows me to be able to build up with my joint compound paste subsequently. Okay, so I did go in and finish covering the wire mesh with plastic bandages yesterday, and it's fully dry and is now ready for the next step. I'm just going to lift it up so you guys can see what it looks like. This is what it's looking like at the moment. There are some areas that I've already noticed that I would prefer to build up volume as I go along. But yeah, this is primarily what you can expect the finished product to look like, unless I change my mind at any point, which I don't think I will, fingers crossed. Um, for the first layer, it's still a little flexible. And by that, I mean, I can't apply too much pressure on this because it will bend. But the more I build up with my joint compound mixture or my texture paste, then it will begin to solidify and really harden and have that durability that I am looking for. And so over the next week or two, I will be applying several layers of my texture paste. Usually I'll do like maybe 3 to 4 layers in a day, let it dry, give it some time, maybe overnight, then get back to it. You know, sometimes I'll have to work on other projects. Maybe I'll wait a day or two, maybe more in between, but usually it takes me about 1 to 2 weeks for me to apply enough texture paste. And so today I'm just going to do some of that, share that with you, and most of it will take place off camera because, again, it is a repetitive process. And if you haven't seen the video where I share the details of my texture paste, I already have 3 videos out now giving you literally all I know, how I make this, mix this or this mixture. So definitely check those out if you haven't seen them already. But yeah, let's get into the process of building volume. So it's been a few days, and what I've really just focused on is adding layers of my joint compound mixture or my texture paste to the sculpture. Um, I've lost count how many layers I've added. We're not quite there yet, but I'm at the point where it is strong enough or solid enough that I can now turn it on its face and work on the back of the piece. And so this is what the back looks like. As you can see, it's still missing plaster bandages, and this is because at the onset, I mentioned that the plaster bandages, they're really flexible, right? And so it's like if I had, excuse me, if I tried to work on the back of the piece a little too early, it would have destroyed the shape of the sculpture because it needs to be able to take that weight. I mean, granted, it's not heavy, but you still want it solid enough. And so, what I will be doing today is adding the plaster bandages to the back of the artwork and building up with my joint compound paste so that I can then begin to work on the whole piece seamlessly. So I've been sculpting this piece for some time now. It's got many, many layers of my texture paste. And today is a sanding day. So I am about to begin a sanding session. This is what it looks like at the moment. I've tried my best to also make it as smooth as possible with my layering and sculpting, but ultimately I do have to sand. And so what I'm going to do is pop on my mask and get to work. Also, I was gonna say, after the sanding, I may not necessarily film the next steps or the immediate steps after, but what I'm going to do after sanding, I still will go over it and layer some additional joint compound to it. Sanding will reveal spots that maybe require a little bit more sculpting on my end or require just a little bit more of that mixture. And so, I don't necessarily just sand and then go straight to painting. It's very typical that after sanding, I still have to go over it with my texture paste or my joint compound mixture. So I just wanted to say that before continuing, but now that I've said that, let's get right to work. What's up, fam? So today, this piece is ready to go into the next steps. This means that I am done sculpting, sanding. It is ready to be painted. Um, and so before that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over and attach the hanging wire to the back. I'm just going to place it face down so that I have the back position for work. Just going to put a dirty work cloth underneath because, you know, my countertop surface is hard and it gives a bit of a barrier. Okay. So now that I have this with the back up, what I am going to do next is attach a hanging wire. And really the process for this for me is to measure about 3/3 of the length, and that's where I usually attach my hanging wire. I don't do halfway, I go 3/3 to the top. And so I'm going to just take some time to quickly do that, and the next step would be to apply my primer, but we'll check back in a second. Okay, so like I mentioned, I'm going to be attaching my hanging wire to about 1/3 of the length. And so what I'm just doing now is measuring that out and marking it so I know exactly where to put my eye hooks. Now that I know where they're going, I'm just going to drill a small pilot hole that I can screw my hook into. I've got my piece of wire and I'm just going to loop it into one of the hooks. This is optional, but I like to do it to reinforce the strength of my wire, but I just do kind of a quick twist around. Okay, so next, what I like to do is when you're attaching your hanging wire, you don't want it to be very taut like this. You always want to leave just a little bit of room. Otherwise, it makes it difficult to hang on the wall. But regardless, what I still like to do is I like to eyeball what I think is enough room, but still test it out on a wall before I completely seal it off. And so what I'm going to do now is just do a couple light loops, hang it on the wall, and if it's good, I'm going to tighten the loop and we're done with the hanging. So the hanging wire has been attached, and since I've got that worked out, my very next step is to apply my primer so I can prepare for painting. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the entire sculpture with this household primer that I use and I love very much. It's called Sticks. It will be linked in the description if you care. But if you don't have this on hand, any good primer should work. I should also mention that the reason this primer is really necessary is because the paint that I use is a hydroalcoholic paint. So it's alcoholic inks, and without priming the surface, they do not have their very best sheen or look. So I highly recommend that you do not skip this step if you're going to be painting your sculpture with an alcohol ink. You might be able to get away with this if you're using acrylic paint, but definitely prime for this purpose if you're going to be using this paint. All right, let's get into it. The next step is for me to apply a layer of black acrylic paint before going in with my chrome ink. And so what I'm going to do now is just apply my good old apple barrel matte black paint over the sculpture. I do this because the paint works best on darker surfaces, and I also just really love this black paint as part of my process because it also allows me to see the sculpture in new light. Sometimes it will point out areas that I might be unhappy with, and so it offers me new perspective. But if you're asking, can I get away with doing this or without doing this? Yes, you can absolutely skip the black paint if you don't want to. So it's been a few hours and I let the black paint dry, and I have begun to paint the back of the sculpture in my liquid chrome ink, which is from Molotow. I think is how you pronounce it, but in any case, it will be linked in the description if you're interested in purchasing one. But also, if you're wondering why I prefer to start from the back when I'm painting, it's because then I can flip the sculpture on its face, paint the back, and then put it on my turntable and work on the front while allowing the back to dry as well. So it's kind of just a fast process for me. But anyway, I'm gonna get right into painting the face of the sculpture. So this is the final look. Um, I am really happy with how it turned out. It is called In Between the Lines. And if you're not new here, you're already aware that this is part of my futuristic collection where I use metallics to interpret the future of art in a modern dystopian future or world. And so I have made a ton of these colors or pieces in these colors already, and that's because they're in higher demand than any of my other pieces. So I will continue to make them. I absolutely love the color. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. Um, as a reminder, all of the links will be left in the description box if you're interested in the paint. If you're interested in any of my other materials, just feel free to check out the links in the description box and hopefully you're able to find what you're looking for. If you're looking to shop any of my pieces, which, yes, I appreciate you in advance, the links will also be left in the description box. I highly, highly recommend that you check out my website because you can get 10% off your purchase there. But yeah, this has been so much fun to put together. I hope that you enjoyed the process, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.